Patricia, very welcome to this interview of Capricorn TV. Here we are over the lovely Giza Plateau where you live. Perhaps, Patricia, which I'm not too familiar about your early life or background, just tell us a little bit about that, Patricia, but also tie in how you came to live on the Giza Plateau, because it's a wonderful, beautiful story.
It's a long story. Actually, I was born and raised in Pennsylvania in the United States. And my attraction for Egypt came at a very, very young age. I used to read my father's National Geographics, just page through them, and when I saw my first pictures of the pyramids and the temples and the symbolism even, I just knew that Egypt was home. I talked about it my whole life. At Halloween I would dress up in costumes of Egyptian style, Cleopatra, Isis. All my cats were named Isis or Widget or Wadget, or, it was just always Egyptian themed. I had known all my life I would come to Egypt one day. And it really, it hit me at one point that I just had to come. And when I heard the voice that said now is the time, I just went online and started looking up Egyptian tours and found the Star Elders tour, which featured Hakim and Stephen Mailer. And I read both of Stephen Mailer's books, Land of Osiris and From Light into Darkness, and totally resonated with everything that they talked about, that Hakim talked about. And so this was the tour for me, and so I came. And I came again a little over a year later, to another tour, a reunion tour actually, where Hakim came out of retirement and went on the tour with us. And it was just phenomenal. It was phenomenal to actually listen to Hakim at the sites, to see the reception he had by the keepers and the guards. Everybody would run out and hug, and they'd all be in tears. And the group was about 40 of us, and we were all just so blessed to have had that experience with him. Mm-hmm. But I still hadn't met my current husband, Yosef. It was actually, another year or two later that I came back on my own, actually with a friend or two, and Hakim had asked me to stay. He said, why don't you just, stay a little longer? So I did, and kind of the rest is history. It's, I just stayed.
Well, it's nice to have interviewed yourself and Yosef on the radio, but I see the dynamic between you two guys here and what you're doing at the Chematology. You're part of the Cajun School of Mysticism, Kemet School. Tell us a little bit about that, Patricia, and your involvement in that, and where you want to go with that.
Well, we originated it, it was right after, or actually right before we got married, that Hakim passed from the physical, and it was a very sad time, unfortunately. And Yosef and I talked immediately about how we were going to carry on the tradition of the teachings, which was, it just had to be shared with the world, and it had to continue. And not only that, one of the things we base the school on is it's an open forum. It's free for anyone interested in Egypt, our ancient mysteries. We want you to participate, be a part of it. We have, a Facebook group page that is extremely active, more than 12,000 members.
Really interesting too.
Well, it's fantastic for people to come together. But Hakim had this open door policy here at the house, where any people from all over the world, experts in their fields, people like Greg Braden and David Icke, and I could go on, but people came, Barbara Hand-Clow, Nikki Scully, to come and learn from Hakim. And they would, everyone welcome in the house, and the exchange of ideas. And, it just was constantly a place or a forum, as I said, for people to come together and share and learn and grow in that knowledge. And so this is what we wanted to do, is to carry on that tradition, and that's why we created the Kemet School of Ancient Mysticism.
Wow. It's nice that we have a male and a female perspective too, Patricia, and there's not enough ladies out there talking about this stuff, and that's what I love that you do, because we have a different way of looking at it. The way you spoke when you were a kid, as a boy, I liked it for loads of different reasons. I was like wanting to feed the scientific brain, but it's not all about that, Patricia. You see the female perspective as important, or if not more important?
I wouldn't say more important, no. Both are equally important, and I think today people are now embracing both sides of themselves anyway, the feminine and the masculine. We're hoping to see more of this happen. But the female perspective is a little bit different, and even the way Joseph and I approach things. He's a stonemason, and he's interested in the ancient technologies, and you know, looking at the stone and seeing all the anomalies, and he has an amazing insight into, you know, what's spectacular and where it came from, and his ability to read the glyphs and all his knowledge from his father. And then I come in, and I've been studying the esoteric sciences all my life and have a background in color theory and digital technology, and I take a look at some of the aspects that I can see where that comes into play. Quantum theory, things like this that have fascinated me all my life. And we start to look at the mythologies and the sites, and we can put two and two together, where sometimes we can see that they actually laid out these sites, these ancient energy devices, that it's almost in sync with what we find in the mythology and how they're describing, because the mythology itself is describing scientific processes, and well, spiritual and scientific, which are actually almost the same thing in an amazingly advanced way. So when we put that knowledge together, sometimes we have aha moments at the same time, and he'll come up and I'll have gotten it from books or on the internet, and we'll both be like, let me, and we end up saying the same thing, but coming at it from different directions. So it's an amazing, yeah.
Sometimes it's a wonderful dynamic that you need to explore and find out in a natural setting.
Well, and we give ourselves the space. You know, we don't agree on everything, but we're open and we listen. And then, you know, over time, we usually end up agreeing totally with each other. But we don't, you know, we're so open with what we're learning and what we're studying and our different ways of approaching it, that it enables us to look and feel and walk around different things, and then oftentimes come to the same conclusions. So it's really nice.
On the mythologies then, Patricia, because you were telling me that Hakeem would say that all mythologies would stem from here in a way, and that this was the originator of all mythologies in the world, perhaps?
Well, I don't know, like, all the mythologies in the world. Hakeem would talk about an ancient Kemet, a very ancient, advanced civilization, both spiritually and technologically, in an ancient Kemet, which was Egypt, much, much larger than we know of Egypt today. An expanse that would have gone into the Mediterranean and and spanned way south into Africa. So a much larger area. Wow. Tens of thousands of years ago, that migrated, like tribes would have migrated from this civilization out to different parts of the world. And so a lot of the mythologies will see similarities, and it stems from this very ancient time. And then when we actually look at what the mythologies might mean on the different levels, we can see that they often mean the exact same thing, just using different icons and characters to say the same thing.
Synchronization of the same ideas.
Exactly, syncretism.
Wow. Tell me about the gods and the netters.
The gods and the netters. Two totally different. No, actually, the pantheon of Egyptian gods and goddesses were not originally what we would say, or what Hakeem taught us, were not originally meant to be worshipped or revered as gods and goddesses, but they were representations, they were symbolic. They were called netters, which we get from the word, or the consonants, the glyphs for the consonants, NTR, which when pronounced, you get netter, but you also get your root word for eternal, for nature, for natural, for natal. So this word, you know, even the origin itself speaks volumes. It showed their deep connection to nature, and this pantheon of netters actually was a representation of cosmic forces, natural forces. It was, to me, it's a detailed map of the nature of our reality as we go through cycles of existence.
The nature of everything was their philosophy. That was their philosophy.
It was about nature, yes, on every level.
That's where we got our modern word for physics from. The Greek word physis meaning nature. Nature is to understand.
Which they got from Egypt.
Powerful. Tell me about the cycles of time, because this is something that really, at first look, a handful of authors have been talking about linear rise of civilization and how that's not working, but it's not just enough to say that it's a rise and fall of civilization, because people want to know why it rises and falls, and how it rises and falls, and what's the evidence of that?
Well, this is something that I look into, and I mean, you could start as simply as saying we have day and night cycles, and that day and night is reflected in our winter and summer cycles, and then we have the great year, and we have the precession. And if you look at this dark and light, we see this, and the Egyptians, I think, were the originators of as above, so below. So we see these cycles in the cosmos. We see it, down to the very cells. Everything is cycling all the time. But if you look at this, even from the mythologies, I can take a look at this. And Hakim said, and the indigenous all over the world say, of course, we cycle through dark and golden ages. I mean, the Greeks would talk about the bronze, gold, this way, and then in India they talk about the Vedic cycles, or the yugas, the Kali Yuga, yes. And in Egypt, they actually had 5 stages, and they likened them to the stages of the sun as it goes through the sky. So it's born in the morning, it rises on the horizon, and sets at night, only to rise again the next day. And the 5 stages were represented. You had Keper, which was the winged scarab, which is basically the stage we're moving into now, the awakening as the sun rises on the horizon. And then you would have Ra, and then Un, which is where our root word for noon, and Aten, which is where if you're familiar with Akhenaten, yes. He changed his name from Amenhotep IV to Akhenaten as almost to honor this high cycle, the highest cycle, which was the Aten cycle. And then we dip into the age of Amun, or Amen. And consider that we all say Amen at the end of our prayers in many of our religions. Yes. You're actually saying Amun or Amen means the hidden. So you're almost saying, I agree to keep it hidden. But the hidden is when we go into this dark cycle, okay, which is the cycle we're in now, which I would liken to the duality. This is when we dip into this low vibrational, 3-dimensional world of separation.
Only to rise again.
Only to rise again.
The emergence.
Exactly. And we talked about the netters. Horus is actually the sun, S-U-N or S-O-N, rising on the horizon. Horus, he's the sun as it rises on the horizon. Set, his polarity, the netter Set, who many people say evil, which there was no concept of evil at the beginning, back during this advanced time. Set is sunset. It's when we dip into the glow cycle. So you're looking at the 2 polarities.
Do you think we're just coming out? We're at the emergence then stage where we've just left this dark?
We are. It's a process. We're not there. We're not here or there. We're coming out of the dark age. We do realize we live in a world where the concept of divide and conquer is used against us, and so much is kept hidden from us. And we have to have faith, they tell us, in a God that exists. Well, we have faith that the sun's going to rise again. And I do take this a step further, and I like the work of Walter Cruttenden when he talks about Sirius, and I can actually take it into the mythologies, where the mythologies themselves will talk about Sirius and its significance as a possible binary star with our sun. And as Sirius, who Isis is Sirius, okay, as a representation, as a netter, this is one of the things she represents. So if Isis is in the mythology, in the story, there's a story about Isis and Osiris, and where Isis, if you consider that we're in this binary system, and Isis is coming closer, okay, in the mythology, I'm sorry I'm being convoluted, but in the story, you have the 4 brothers and sisters, which are Isis and Osiris, and Nebhet and Set, okay, that we talked about. And Osiris and Isis are like the positive, the light. And then Nebhet and Set are the 4-dimensional, or the earth-based. So you have the heaven and the earth-based. Again, you always have the heaven, the higher, the light and the dark. Well, Set gets jealous of Osiris in the story, and this is simplified. And he actually, at some point, chops Osiris into 42 pieces. Okay, now there's 42 gnomes in the land of Egypt. Osiris represents the land, okay, the people. This is he's all of us. He's mankind as we go through the cycles, okay? There's also 42 bones in our spine. So yeah, it's amazing how many levels. Well, in the story, Isis comes and she goes out and she finds all these parts because Set has scattered them all over the land. Well, she comes, now consider this other sun, which is 10 times the size of our own, this other star, comes closer, she comes and she finds all those parts of Osiris, and she magically puts them back together again, okay? And then she copulates with him. She gets all of the parts except his phallus, okay? She magically forms one, copulates with him, and 9 months later, Horus is born, okay? The new son, or the new born Osiris on the horizon. So you're actually even looking at these two suns interacting with each other in this mythology.
The allegory speaks volumes.
Exactly. It's there.
So I'm looking in the last 20 years, Patricia, at a paradigm, a new awakening. Is this what we're talking about? I think even just people realizing that we have an alternative history.
We do, yes, and I think people are awakening everywhere. And this is one of the reasons that we all share is you know, as people awaken, they have nowhere to go. You know, I talk to people, I travel a bit, and people say, yeah, I know there's something else, or I know this isn't, you know, but they don't know where to look. You know, they're you know, programmed by their television sets. They, you know, they don't know where to go for the truth.
Hungry, but they don't know.
They're so hungry. So yes, I think it's so important that more people, you know, get off the fence and share what they know.
Chemist School of Ancient Mysticism, that's where to go.
Exactly. Open door.
You know, tell us about some of the temples that you visit, Patricia, what that means to you personally, and what that means to the group tours that you bring, maybe some interactions.
Well, the temples themselves, and again, when we talked about the cycles, we talk about this advanced stage when even Hakim said that mankind had access to 360 senses. Well, when you think of that, that's full circle capability, sensibility. That's having senses. We have 5 or 6 that we can relate to, but consider having 8, 9, 10. You know, needless to say, 360. You have capability. You don't need written language to communicate. You don't need oral language to communicate. You're communicating on a heart-to-heart, frequency-based communication. Therefore, it's totally pure. But you have the ability to conceive of and create beyond anything we can even imagine with our limited three-dimensional minds. And so when we look at some of the sites, like the Pyramid Complex, and we have so many people stepping forward and coming up with beautiful theories about sacred geometric patterns, you know, and all these spirals, that, you know, the Fibonacci spirals that work here and they work here, and star correlations, so many different theories. And you know what? There is every possibility that all of those theories work, layer upon layer upon layer, because of their ability to plan and create when you have these higher sensibilities and a higher vibrational cycle. So when we look at some of the temples, and some of the ones that we go into are actually, they're the temple above the temple below. There's temple below temple below temple, but they would quarry from the old temple to create the new temple. So we see them, you know, the oldest parts. Well, Yosef can go in with his eye, and actually he can name the different layers. But we see layer upon layer upon layer. But they kept the same concepts. The temples themselves used the design. They used the sacred geometry in the layout, but they also used a certain combination of stones and running water for its energetic effects, and they aligned them with solar and stellar events. So when we see the temples, they actually, even when they would recreate the temple again, sometimes the alignments, because of the procession, would have moved a bit, but they would have moved the temple a bit. So you have all these factors working within the temples, laid out in such a way that they're bioorganic energy devices. And so they interact with your own body, mind, and spirit as you're walking through them. So as we begin to go through them, if you're aware, you're actually feeling, you're having an interaction with this space, with the stones, with the natural environment that they created for you to walk through. You know, and then if you're aware of how to utilize that, and even to another extent, like with the sound chambers and the toning, then you have the ability to even create energetic fields beyond that you can utilize for health, body, mind, and spirit as well.
You know, just as you're saying that, I'm thinking about every person I know that's gone to Egypt. I always talk to them, what you think, you relate your stories, but there's one thing that they all do, that they all talk about the temples and what they mean to them, how they relate to them, because temples make you think. They make you think about what it means, how they made them, what what they symbolised,
Exactly.
whether it's the art or the architecture.
Exactly. Well, and yes, I even failed to mention the symbolism. When even the symbolism on the walls will speak to you on many different levels. And so if even if you're unaware of what it means, if you take the time as you're wandering through to interact with it, it's having our DNA holds a capability of understanding symbolism on many different levels. So even if you don't consciously understand what's happening, you are interacting with this symbolism. And the more you learn, I always say, as physical bodies, we're code reading devices. And we read these codes. We're constantly having frequencies beamed at us, and we read them through our senses, which right now we're sort of limited to 5, maybe 6 senses. But this is how we interpret it. But we interpret it based on our library of wisdom and knowledge. So it's actually challenging us to increase that body of wisdom and knowledge. And this is another thing that the temples help us do, because as you're going through it, it's raising your vibration and your ability to understand and consciously interact with your environment, which is what it's all about.
You know, the beauty of the architecture that's physically, logically and technically carved and pristine, I think appeals to that left brain, and then the right brain, it appeals to the symbolic thought, the art, artistic expression. You know, I think even with all the different theories for the pyramids, that appeals again to the right brain, because it's simultaneous thought. That's what the right brain does.
Exactly.
And I think you think that the ancient Egyptians just go between the left and the right wheel as much as they wanted.
Well, I think it's more a case of they were able to resonate the two, and this is. I think this is what we're all, again, challenged to do, is to resonate those two polarities. There's actually a symbol called the Simatawi that speaks to this. It has an image of the heart and the larynx, the voice box, and the larynx, and the lungs, and the polarities on either side coming into resonance through sound. So it's speaking to us on several levels, and it's also telling us to somehow resonate our mind and our hearts, because this is, again, part of that separation. Our minds and our hearts have been separated, and today we find that if we're all in our brain, we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble. But if we live in our hearts, we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble. But we're usually safer if we go with our heart. But if we can resonate the two, if we can intake that information, because everything breathes in and out. We pulse, and your mind is pulsing, your brain is pulsing, and it's pulling in information. But that information can be manipulated before it gets to you. And then you have ego. So it's being manipulated as it leaves. But if you're communicating on a pure heart basis, that's totally pure. There is no room for manipulation. So I would say if you can somehow begin to resonate, take that information received and discern it through your heart, resonate with your heart, then you're getting closer to the truth of what you're experiencing.
That's so beautifully expressed, Patricia. That mental and emotional harmony and balance is beautiful. Do you think the ancients set their environment up to do this? In other words, they set up a natural system, whether that's architecture or the way they did business, or they took only what they wanted from the land. They recognized everything from astronomy, acoustics. Their philosophy was all set up for this. They
understood on every level that everything vibrates. If Tesla said it, it's all about frequency and vibration, and everything cycles. And they understood on as above, so below, down to our very cells. So everything, they understood that this process is totally mirrored. So, when you talk about the temples and the sites and the architecture, and I talk about how it interacts, they just understood it as like a living organism. It's something that breathes, it pulses in and out. The temples were never meant to be places for pilgrimage to revere or honor a god or a goddess. They were meant to be places where we rejuvenate our body, mind, and spirit, where you would go and actually, just by interacting with this environment, having that knowledge and wisdom to understand it, you would come out totally rejuvenated, totally balanced, in Mott.
That's fascinating. On the acoustics, Patricia, these sound chambers, which I've had the pleasure of the Great Pyramids, and I've also had some other curious chambers and temples, and the resonance in there, even when you or chant, your chest cavity is moving with the sound. It's such a physical thing to feel. Your mind gets affected, your consciousness gets affected. You'll still go and experience this today.
Oh, constantly. The sites are still alive. This is something I always talk about, that they may not be vibrating or pulsing at the same rate as which they were when they were first created, but they are absolutely still alive. You experienced it yesterday. We have several favorite places, chambers, where we take people where the resonance is so profound, and it creates, what you're actually doing is you're creating that portal field, that vortex of energy. It's almost like a 0-point energy where anything's possible. You get yourself in a no time, no space zone where people have written books just spending time in that space, and you create that through sound resonance within these chambers. It's phenomenal. And we've had spontaneous healings. We've had crystals turn color and separate, not shatter, but just separate and have phantoms and interesting things inside. And
I'm glad you mentioned crystals, because there's so much crystal technology, if you will, or crystal knowledge, or crystal use at all these ancient sites, Patricia. It was incredibly important to these guys.
Well, when you think of what are crystals, we can see at some of the sites, we see the crystals in several different stages. It's water becomes salt, becomes crystal through a system of heat and pressure. So crystal is actually, it holds memory, and it has an energetic breath or vibration. So of course, it's alive. Everything is alive and has consciousness. So I think those of us that are attracted to crystals, we feel this. And you often hear when you go into a crystal shop and they say, I want to buy a crystal, and they say, which one calls to you? Because they do. And it's not heebie-jeebie, it's just, it is the way it is. If you're aware, if you feel, if you allow yourself to feel.
For me, it's lepidolite crystal.
Yes.
Purple, I love purple.
Oh, I love amethyst, yes. Citrine, I love them all.
Yeah, and the thing is, they had crystal as a technology. They had stuff that's carved in crystal. It was a techno-spiritual major part of their civilization.
Absolutely. Even in that combination of stones we talked about, and we find them at all the sites. You have granite, which is predominantly crystal, and basalt, and limestone, and so many of the igneous rocks, because they're crystalline, and alabaster, Egyptian crystal. We find it everywhere. And the alabaster is an energy device we always see working with running water. So again, that crystal, the different stages of what the crystal is.
I sometimes think when I see these pink granite monster slabs that are polished like a mirror, I think it's like if they had a choice to use a different material, they would have.
It would have been simpler.
I don't think they had that choice, Patricia. I think this was...
It's by design. Absolutely by design. Why would you go all the way 600 miles south to Aswan to quarry granite? These huge, some of these blocks are 200 tons or more, and to even talk about the question of how they got them to some of the sites, some of them are up on mountaintops like Serabit El Qadim. How and why there had to have been a reason. It had to be by design, because you can quarry the rock that's at your disposal locally.
In a way, even in an engineering sense or a technical sense, we don't do things like that unless the reward is good.
Exactly.
Or there is a high reward.
Exactly.
And I think that high reward, we have to look for the spiritual, or at least a spiritual.
Or multifunction. If this is a bioorganic breathing device, yes, it could have been, Christopher Nunn talks about Giza power plant as an energy, creating energy. Well, maybe it did that, but maybe it also was rejuvenating body, mind, and spirit, and also had a myriad of other functions. I mean, the one thing we talk about is that each one of these sites, and each one of the pyramids, and each one of the Holy of Holies is tuned or toned to a different frequency. Each has a different purpose. Each related to a different sense or vibration that we can increase within ourselves.
Tell me about some symbology on the Hanuti. This is the interesting one.
The Hanut. The Hanut. Well, Hakim named them the Hanut or the Hanuti, and he would have said, as we talked about this beautiful advanced society, both spiritually communicating on this wonderful frequency-based communication, and then we dip into a low cycle. And it's during this low cycle, the cycle of Amun, that, as we talked about, we have this divide and conquer, this separation. And because of this, And because now, we've lost our ability to communicate purely, and we have this written and oral language that was formulated, then we have this ability to manipulate. And Hakim would have talked about the Hanuti as the first, the priests, really, the priests of Amun, who would have come in and to manipulate the people to create a forum for their own harvestless jobs. In other words, before, in this advanced civilization of ancient Kemet, they didn't have a term or a concept of death the way we do. There was no word for death as we understand it today. But the Hanut they introduced this concept of death and the need for salvation and judgment in order to create this job for people to come to them and bring their offerings and their gold, and I'll pray for you, and there's the famous many people have seen it, the papyri, the judgment scene, where your heart is being weighed against a feather,
and the feather of truth.
Yeah, exactly. And if your heart is too heavy, then this beast over here is going to eat you. And eventually they introduce Horus, and if you bring enough gold and offerings, then Horus will be there. He'll tip the scales for you, so we'll get you up to heaven anyway. So they've created this whole bring us gold, and and the whole idea of mummification and all the rituals attached to that, the costly rituals. This is all started by the Hanut that still exists today in our corporate, political and religious organizations, those that are trying to control us for their own benefit. So this is what Hakim talked about. When you're in this dark stage, you're challenged to look beyond what's being told. Don't just accept things at face value, but start to feel, look, discern for yourself. Again, resonate that heart and
I think today we have an infrastructure that blinds us. It's set up to blind us.
Yeah.
You spoke about Akhenaten. Akhenaten was one of the most interesting, strange characters in the world of ancient Egypt because he was a pioneer in one way. Do you think that he was this the same time as the Hanut? Did they try to dispel what he was doing?
Well, yes, it was the same time, actually. And, nobody really knows the true story. And everybody looks at Akhenaten from so many different angles.
Exactly.
I look at the way he was presented, okay? You see all the other pharaohs are in perfect, beautiful physicality. They all look like handsome young, bulls. And this was by design as well. They, the perfect image. They're gods. And then Akhenaten comes along, and you see pictures of him, and he looks like he has breasts, and he's got this pregnant stomach, okay? And I think, maybe he's looking to show what's important, which he changes his name to Akhenaten to look at this high cycle of high wisdom. And then during that high cycle, it was just something we haven't talked about, but Hakim said it was a matriarchal society. Not in that it was women domineering men, but it was more about the recognition or the honoring of the nurturing of the mother, the power of the mother. There's nothing more powerful than the love of a mother, especially when her child's hurt, or the healing capability. Who do you go to when you're sick? Mommy, mommy's going to make it better. This is a huge and powerful energy in the universe. I think it also represents Sirius Isis herself. This is that high wisdom. And so when Akhenaten presents himself this way, is he telling us to look at this high cycle, to remember what's important? And I think this is what it's about. Yeah.
They say the pioneers, you can tell them because they have an arrow in their back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think Akhenaten was a pioneer of sorts.
Exactly.
Talk about the matriarchy versus the patriarchy, just for the viewers, maybe just tell us a definition of matriarchy. It's not the opposite of patriarchy.
No, it's not. I don't believe it is. I'm sure it does exist in some areas where women would love to dominate, and we've heard about the Amazons, and I don't think that works any more than the patriarchy where men are dominating women. And when we talk about the matriarchy of ancient Kemet, as I said, we're talking about a reverence for that nurturing. It's a reverence for an energy. Okay, and that men and women can both embrace. If men were to be nurturing like mothers, as well as women, wouldn't we all live in peace? Wouldn't we all embrace each other? So it's an energy that's not necessarily specific to a man or a woman. It's a powerful energy that we need to honor. And yes, with our women, with our mothers, because if we don't honor our mothers during this patriarchy, and we talk about the patriarchy being introduced at the same time as the priests of Amun, when the Romans came in and really, really suppressed women, and this is the time that women are pushed to the back. They're not. It's historic. We know this, and what's happened to society without the woman, without this reverence for the mother and for the woman? We have relationships that don't work because you have this. Exactly, it's an imbalance. So when we talk about moving into this age of Kepler, this is what I would challenge people to do, is to remember to bring these polarities back into resonance, to accept that side of yourself that is nurturing and loving, and honor it, if you're a man or a woman. It's not about us, women finally taking their rights and gaining control. That never felt right to me. But it's more about remembering what is the most powerful force on earth.
That motherly nurturing is something we could do a bit in the world at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you follow the work of Shwana de Lewis? Have you looked into Shwana?
I have, of course. Yeah, fascinating.
What an interesting guy. I mean, for me, it was instrumental in to understand that the temples were living.
Exactly.
Living and breathing. And,
exactly.
I think Karnak's probably the finest example. The temple in man is what really opened up for me.
Well, they all are. And he would present the temple of Luxor as being the temple of man, and Karnak. All of them are built like this. They all are raised up. And the Holy of Holies is your pineal gland. It's the seed. It's the place of your own light, your heaven. You have the chakras of your heaven and hell. You have your root chakra, and this is where your greed and your avarice. You can live down here, or you can live up here in your pineal gland, and this is the Holy of Holies. This is that power, that high, wise power, the seed of the temple. But it's not just reflecting man, but it's reflecting the cosmos, because man is a reflection of the cosmos. So even some have said that Karnak is the universe, and Luxor is the temple of man, and I would say no, they're both reflecting both. They're reflecting everything.
Do you think perhaps then the mystery schools were to protect from the patriarchy, or do you think they were a part of the patriarchy?
I think they become, anything that's kept hidden can become corrupt. And so, people talk about all these, the Illuminati and and you think, probably when they originated as organizations, they had great ideas and great hopes but when you keep ideas in secret, you keep everything behind a closet door, then it becomes corrupt, I think, almost by design, that things have to be shared. We have to have everything. This is where we're headed today. This open communication, the internet, people are like, oh, no, you can't, I have to put a price tag on that. You can't put that on the internet, or, and people are saying, that's my information. And it isn't. You can't put your name on information. We're coming to, and Hakeem and I talked about this, we're coming to a time where information's just up there to be grabbed. You can just have it. We can't put price, we just need to share. No borders anywhere.
The thing that grabs me is that Hakeem was doing this without the internet. He wasn't in his later years, obviously, but this was all done. It was an open door in terms of, before the internet age.
Exactly. He understood it. And, we're all doing it today, and we all have access. We've forgotten. It's all latent within us. And we've been told we don't. And if we could eliminate these core beliefs and remember how empowered we are as individuals, then we'll have all that capability and that access. It's just remembering that we have it.
We were at Saqqara yesterday, Patricia. We didn't get a chance to talk about the hospital there.
Yeah.
So please share with the viewers about the Saqqara hospital.
Yes, one of my favorite temples is Saqqara. It's one of the oldest temples here in Egypt, and it's right down the road from Giza. It's actually, about 8 miles from Giza to the south, and it's Saqqara is the place where the step pyramid is. And there is a fabulous place at Saqqara. And Saqqara is huge, but this place that Egyptologists would call the Hebset, or the courtyard for ceremony, we would say no. Hakeem called it the hospital, and it's a healing center. And the one thing about Saqqara is many people know that Imhotep is accredited with being the architect of this amazing structure. And I would actually say, and Imhotep is also credited, he's like this, Renaissance man who could do everything. He was, the architect, and he was a healer, and he was so many different things. But when you look at architect and healer, you're actually looking at the architecture of energy. And this is, to me, Imhotep is a level to be strived to, that all the priests would have strived for. And it would be a master or someone who understood the architecture of energy, not only structurally, but also physically. And so the healer, if you're going to heal, you're actually looking at it. When someone is sick or diseased, there's a blockage of the flow within their energetic system. And so the healer, if they're capable of unblocking that so that everything flows freely again, you've created the healing, the health. And this is what it's all about, energetic architecture. And so the hospital is on this site, accredited to Imhotep, and it's a healing center. And what we see, and we still see remnants of it, the site is in it's been quarried and it's in shambles. Ancient site, could be tens of thousands of years old, according to Hakim. And we see there's a patient's table still left. And we see these niches, okay? And the niches, these are like little holes in the wall, carved out beautifully. And these niches are connected by design to underground shafts that connect to the patient's tables with running water, okay? So here again, we're talking sound and running water. And so in order to even get back to the niche, you have to walk this little tiny labyrinth, which is interesting, okay? And then the healer would actually put his head into one of the niches, and he could envision, as the patient would be on the patient's table, of course. What's interesting about the patient's table is there were two sets of stairs, the two polarities, the masculine and the feminine, and the patient would choose which one to step up. And then he would be there, and the healer, as I said, would put his head in the niche, and he would be able to envision the energetic body of the patient and see where the blockages were. And then through tone, he would tone the healing into the body, and this is how he would release the blockage. And it still works today. We've had success when we've had the ability, when there's not lots of people there. We've had success with this.
Imhotep was a genius.
Yes.
This guy was like.
But it's a true understanding of energy. This is what this is what makes a genius. When you can understand how energy works on all its levels, subtle, from, as I said, as above, so below. If you understand how it breathes and vibrates, then you are a genius.
Coming then, tying back to the 360 senses, particularly males or brain, would perhaps try to go, well, the sixth one is psychic and the seventh one is A, B, C, and they'll label what each one is. I mean, that's what we try to process that inner left brain constructed world today. Perhaps each one was just a slightly variation.
Well, this is exactly, you're right on the money. And Hakim, at one point, he wanted to start labeling and naming them, and the 360 netters are the 360 senses. But what's funny about them, you can't label them. When you label something, you put it in a box and you limit it. And this is what he discovered. You can't put a label. But when you look at these netters, you have 180 female, 180 male, okay? So you have the two polarities. But they're all the females are all aspects of the divine feminine, and all the male are aspects of the divine masculine. And some of them reflect the same, they're different aspects of maybe a planet or a star, as well as something within you. And they can talk about your pineal gland, and they can talk about, the tree and how the tree, they have everything covered, because, as I said, it's a detailed map of everything, the entire nature of our reality, and it's our senses. Position, you see that there are mistakes made. But then if you're not a trained scribe, there's going to be mistakes. And then when they actually look closer at some of the glyphs, they found glyphs that exist, but they're very rare. And Muhammad found them because he teaches hieroglyphics. He had the overlays, and he could actually show where these glyphs exist, and they're pointed out. And they actually have like a code and a name, and they exist, but they're so rare that if this was a fake, it would have been almost, whoever had done this, and they say university students, kind of went out, got drunk, and went up and did this. Well, they wouldn't have had the knowledge, the scope of knowledge they would have needed to have to actually know about these very rare glyphs. Not to mention some of the other things that were included. That, in other words, he used two forms of language. There is a temple language, and then there was a local language in Egypt, a village language. And whoever had done this used a little bit of both. So again, if you're going to do a fake, aren't you going to take the book out and do it by the book? And you're not going to know about the veriglyphs, and you're not going to do a mixture of the two different styles. So that in and of itself, if it had been a fake, someone would have had to go to great lengths to be that crafty. So to me, it does point to authenticity.
Yeah, we've got some heavy hitters getting involved.
How about it? Yeah.
I spoke to Klaus Donner about it, and Klaus is pretty excited, and
yes,
he's hoping to get to exhume a possible burial there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which would be important, because that, you know, anything that really brings to the table any sort of knowledge or research into this site.
Yeah, it's
I've looked at this star map there as well on behalf of Stephen Nevin, and I think that's really worthy of. Well, it's worthy of investigation for many reasons, but mostly because of the Arctic astronomy division.
Yeah.
That gives dating. It gives you a window when it aligns.
Well, it does. And, you know, having been there and talked to so many people while I was there, the Gosford glyphs are important for many reasons. It does prove that there was a relationship or a connection between Egypt and Australia that dates back at least to dynastic times. But there is so much more evidence in Australia that needs to come forward about other connections, other hieroglyphs found, even artifacts found that connect the two countries. And what does that mean? You know, we're seeing, I met with a woman while I was there that had access to some of the secrets in the Aboriginal lore and some of her stories, what she was able to garner from them, from the elders, matched entirely what I talked to you about of ancient Egypt. And you wonder, where did these stories originate, and who you know, how far back do these connections go? I've talked to Stephen Evan, and he talked about tens of thousands of years too. So,
well, for me, I look into cartography, ancient cartography from relatively recent in the Middle Ages right to the Piri Reis map, all sorts. And I think one of the key things of the Piri Reis map is that it's centered on Aswan at a date that suits 30, 70, 75 BC, backed up by astronomy because of the Tropic of Cancer.
yeah.
You know, and that tells you that 30, 70, 75 BC, somebody had mapped at least partially the globe, if not most of the globe. And, you know, why not? Why couldn't it have done like that?
Well, and if we cycle, it just cycles out. It go back millions of years, but through an evolutionary process. So we have two things at play. We have evolution, but we also have a cycling of dark and light ages. When we look at the world, if we look at our history that way, we start to understand where you see these spurts of great growth, and then you see nothing happening for several years, and then spurts of great growth. So if you look at it that way, you start to understand the cycles and how far back we go, and how many times humanity did step up. You know, and this time, if we're going through an evolutionary process and we're moving into a higher cycle, how far will we go now?
Bring on the higher ages, Patricia.
Oh yeah.
Patricia, give us out the website and spell it as well, the spelling for chematology.
Yeah, chematology.com, chematology.com.
And they can see everything about the tour there on the Facebook group. And
absolutely. Or look us up on Facebook, the Kemet School of Ancient Mysticism, or just contact us directly. We have all our email addresses on the website.
Well, I wish you every success with the tour, Patricia, and thank you for your time on the Giza Plateau.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been awesome having you here.